and we'll go ahead and get started. So, hello, my name is Sebastian. I'm over here with Bright Spot Marketing, and today we have a webinar on favorite venues to attract a crowd. Our two speakers today, if I can move the slides here, is Michael Butler, our VP of Sales and a former president of Site Texas, and Amy Simon, our program manager, also of Bright Spot, is also the VP of Leadership at MPI DFW. We also want to make sure that we hear from you. So any questions that come up during this whole presentation, please click the little Q&A button on somewhere on your screen, and then write down a little text box there your questions. It's also good to do so because we're handing out a StubHub gift card for the best question. So, good chances are you can go ahead and win that. So give us your questions. Also want to mention briefly that if you missed our last webinar, because we were doing a two-part webinar series this month, Roadshow Strategies to Boost Your Sales Pipeline is on our YouTube, and you'll be able to find it in the deck that we send out after this webinar itself. And just wanted to give you a heads up if you want to check that out. That is available on our YouTube page. Then I'll go ahead and hand it off to Amy.
Cool. So I'll do a quick recap from that webinar last week with Mike and Rachel about roadshow strategies. So here's 6 things to keep in mind. Location, the wow factor that weighs heavily on someone's decision to join you at your roadshow. Good content, why should they come? Bring them in. Lead time, there should be plenty of time for us to source, contract, discuss, and then that takes us into you building a good invitation list. You want time to curate your invite list, potentially invite a second or third wave, and really lock those customers down. Number 5, engage your local sales team. This is super important. They're the experts on what's cool around them, where people are coming from, traffic patterns, parking, etc. It's super helpful when somebody local weighs in on where maybe your customers are coming from, etc. And then finally, come to us, one-stop service with Bright Spot, hire us to help. We're the subject matter experts, and we can do start to finish event planning, and we'll take great care of you. Yeah.
Amy, Sebastian, great start there. Amy, our subject matter expert in-house for Roadshow, so it's great to be alongside you today. In the strategy last week, I loved it. Rachel, Mike did a great job, but this is the fun part, favorite venues to attract a crowd, any fishermen or women out there. It's really that better and best bait on the hook to attract the right fish, or in this case, probably customers. But let's first talk about before we get to the real agenda, let's first talk about the elephant in the room, Amy, virtual. We're declaring today that virtual is dead. Okay, have a little fun there. So maybe it's only dead for 90% of us, but hey, that number is still rising. Last summer into the fall, it was probably about 80% back to live events. So our agenda today, short and sweet, 1, 2, 3, 4 restaurants. We want to kind of run you through our restaurant tried and true, as well as some pro tips, bright ideas there. Sporting events and venues. And then I think the more creative aspect will be the back half. So stay for it, interactive and unique experiences that you're going to cover for us, Amy. So let's level set here on definitions for roadshows. We're talking about roadshows. What exactly are we talking about? I have multi-city events up top. That's how I refer to them, Amy. I kind of like that term. It's just clear in my mind. And these can mean different things to different enterprises and different marketing folk, but a lot of them have similarities, crossovers. So we just listed a bunch of them here. You're likely familiar with. Field marketing events, maybe considered the same as multi-city events. Hospitality or special events. Lead gen events, partner and product marketing events specific to the sales and marketing organization, B2B events, and then even product launches where the price can start to get up there, especially for global audiences. And then we've probably all been to a lunch and learn or two. And so maybe one more, I think this came up from last week, Amy. Why don't you lead us through this piece?
Yeah, so last week in the Roadshow Strategies webinar, a question came up at the end and it was great. It was talking about budget for road shows. What should we expect? And I think it's very important, since the venue is one of the first things you're sourcing, that you kind of have a concept of what you're going to spend there, because we're going to show you some really cool stuff, but you need to keep in mind that really cool might mean you have to build it from the ground up. So we've got this little key, follow along. You'll see those little badges pop up on our slides, and they'll tell you what type of venue feel you'll get for the money. So watch for these. And that's kind of your key. We won't necessarily stop and be like, this one's expensive or whatever. That's your guide. So.
Great idea. Thanks for adding that, Amy.
Yeah.
So here, maybe just one more part B to that level set, rated PG. So kind of short and fun for pipeline generating. So, we're talking about B2B, although many of these multi-city events could be used in the B2C space. We're focusing on B2B. So you see some typical use cases for these up the top of the funnel. So that kind of green funnel is our fun creative icon for a sales pipeline funnel. You see people going in up at the top in the open end, could be demand gen, lead gen opportunities. So don't really know them yet, but that's the audience type for some of these events. Want to make sure, so we'll be pointing out along the way that, which audience types match right to the venue types we're going to share, or at least sharing some ideas from bright spot recommendations there. Then you get closer into the funnel, training, probably employees or maybe customers who are reselling your product and coming into an event to receive that training, but also maybe an experience to drive engagement through that training that might help reinforce the learning that they're receiving. And product launch down into the funnel, you got partner road shows or ABM, account-based marketing, field marketing initiatives and partner initiatives. And on to the end, now we're getting into these last two, 3, 4 sections down the bottom, the higher probability in the pipeline that these opportunities will close. And so the price may go up because the return on investment would be higher. Keep that in mind. But yeah, closer to the end of the pipeline of these closer events, maybe a customer hospitality event where it's a mix of newer customers that you've established and you need to maintain a relationship with, or it's ultimately those that you're just trying to get across the finish line. So this webinar is rated PG, Amy, and worth mentioning, talking about a minute ago that virtual is dead. We saw the consumer rebound last summer to kind of substantiate that. Restaurants opened back up in late 20 and throughout 21, and stadium sports came back online last year, and concert venues and the like. So many of these venues we're operating now for clients, and we're sure you probably are looking at them too. So we're going to start with restaurants. And, I like this brand and been using it for years. So you may have your own favorite for a roadshow. And the reason I like it, one of the main reasons, is the footprint of the brick and mortar of the space. They've done a really good job at Maggiano's, and not only are you getting the same product, same service, country, nationwide in a brand like this, but they've got meeting space. They can shut the doors, and you don't have other customers in the establishment being a distraction. So you can do your presentation, give them a nice meal, and as you can see with Amy's budget key there, that these are lower cost, maybe up towards that top of that pipeline, lead gen, demand gen type venue matches. And then, you can put a little, if that's bait, that's okay for the hook to get a customer or a prospect in, you can flip forward for me. There's some other ideas that kind of take that up a notch. That best piece of steak on that hook, Ruth's Chris or Fleming's, Morton's, Capitol Grill have probably smaller footprint of privatized room spaces, but they'll work just as well. And I know you have some pro tips here, Amy.
Yeah, so you're probably familiar with those brands. They're safe, they know what they're doing, they're across multiple markets, and they're definitely tried and true. So we've got some new fresh concepts here with multiple locations, up and coming brands in major markets that have event capabilities like AV in a private space for what you're trying to achieve with a road show. And they might be brands people might be familiar with or might not and be excited about. So again, this is, the single dollar sign. It's a it is a restaurant. You wouldn't be looking at a room rental or anything, just an F&B minimum, and pretty straightforward, but you could get a little creative with it with some of these ideas like Seasons 52, City Winery, Firebirds Wood Fired Grill. They're in a lot of major markets, so look them up.
Great.
Yeah. And then here on our next slide, I've thrown up some ideas here about anticipation, considering local celebrity chefs, recent restaurant openings that are trending. Think about something that's a buzz right now, something everybody's talking about but hasn't been to yet. That's obviously a major draw. And when we're talking about that pipeline generation, I would say that these are a great draw for your high priority partners. Or on the flip side, somebody that you might want to make a splash with that might be a new customer, just partners you're targeting. These would be a really good pull. Now, I'll give you a heads up. A lot of these places might be so niche that there might be small tapas plates, or they might not be able to set up a buffet or something, and they might be in too high of a demand. So I'd say maybe 8 to 10 months after they open and the crazy buzz wears off, and give them a little bit of time, but they should still be fresh and exciting. And I put $3 signs there because, like I said, this is a great draw for high priority and maybe somebody that you're trying to spoil a little bit and take care of. So yeah, don't be afraid to try something new too. And I think that, yeah, brings us into sports with Michael.
Yeah, sporting venues, where most all of us are watching near or far our local regional favorite sports team. So NFL cities is kind of an easy go-to as far as footprint for national sporting venues. Major League Soccer, I think, is trending here as a fresh idea in the US. They continue, they're 20-something years old, but they continue to expand their footprint even in the second-tier cities. I think it may be the only major sports team Austin, Texas has. Excuse me. But yeah, sporting events, you can hit the whole funnel here. You can do a venue across the street in a restaurant before the event and give your attendees the tickets. Make it a +1 experience so they're the home hero that day. And then they go in and get their own tickets to the game and get to experience the event with the person they brought along. Or you could rent a suite, a little higher dollar. This would probably cover the spectrum of Amy's budget key from 1 to 3. If you were to rent a suite at Jerry Jones AT&T Stadium, I think it's still called, it's going to be a high dollar event. The per person really jumps up, but the memory, the experience, bringing in a trophy or an ex-Cowboy player, those things really are memorable for attendees.
Yeah, I would say suites at things like MLB, where there's more games in a season, you might get a lower rate versus an NFL where you only have 8 home games at a stadium and you're spending a higher amount. That's up to you on what you're trying to accomplish. One of my favorite ways to connect before the chaos of the game and to keep the people around during the sporting event, like you do for a suite for tailgating. There's companies that bring the party to you. They'll set up the parking lot, they set up tents and games and food and beverage and the bar and everything. And this helps kind of make it, like I said, a one-stop shop. Everybody can be there before the game starts. They can park easily. You don't have to think about like all of the pre-party traffic. If you're at a restaurant and you're trying to get to the game at the same time as the other 100,000 people that are trying to get to the game, kind of give them a home base and give them a good place to start. And then some stadiums also have conference centers built in. So like Oracle Park, home of the San Francisco Giants, has the Bank of America Conference Center attached to the stadium. So you could do an educational component with built-in AV and conference style seating and everything. And then they'll actually escort you from the conference center over to your suite at the game. So it's always a good idea to give people a fresh change of scenery, keep them energized, keep them what's next and looking on to the next thing. So I think that's a great way to also use sports in roadshows.
Bright ideas, Amy. Thanks.
Yeah. And then, so I'll talk about interactive. So interactive venues are spaces that can have both an educational and an interactive element. So this is something that's getting your guests hands-on, could serve as a great team builder too. And to get people that might not know each other acquainted. There's more concept sporting facilities like Top Golf. I'm sure we've all been to Top Golf, and it's great and it's tried and true, but we've got some new sports upon us like shuffleboard and pickleball and ping pong that people might not have done. So chains like these have infrastructure to host events. And I'll kind of put up the flag here and warn you, make sure you vet the venue for what's available. I would go to the website first, find the landing page, look at the top tab, and if it says private events, rentals, groups, some indication that they're accepting groups there, that's a good sign. Because some of them can be so small that they might not be in that space yet. And I would just, keep that in the front of mind. So we've got some pictures here. That's Chicken and Pickle up in the top right. They've got concept restaurants in Kansas City, Missouri, San Antonio, Oklahoma, Dallas, or that Spin Ping Pong Bar and Lounge there at the bottom. They're in major markets like Boston, Philly, New York, Chicago, Seattle. They've got private space. It's cool, good vibes and good energy. And they have private rooms with AV, and then you could transition with F&B and bar. Both of these chains are really good for that. And there's also small regional concepts, of course, like Royal Palms in Chicago, Shuffleboard, and the Tang and Biscuit in Richmond, Virginia, and the Electric Shuffle in Dallas. That'd be like theme-based around shuffleboard, but single places in regions across the US. So again, just something fun for them to do. Look forward to coming. And then here's some regionally specific and most likely privately owned, each individual one privately owned non-chain interactive experiences we've done for clients that they've really liked. So exotic motorsports racing, where you do your meeting in the facility first, and then you take them out. They get to drive exotic cars, glass blowing, and heavy equipment playgrounds where they get to drive excavators and get their hands on some things, they don't get to do every day. So say you want to keep it simple with the venue, but leave a lasting impression. Maybe on our next slide, you could do something at a pretty, toned down venue, but do a custom pop-up shop. Give them something to take away as a substitute for a corporate branded item that you might be handing out at every other event you do. Pick an experience that matches the market you're into. So in Texas here, we've done armadillo races and boot shining and line dancing. And maybe in Chicago, you do a gangster mob tour and like an architectural boat ride. We've done custom cowboy boot and hat fittings in Texas, Maui gym sunglasses in California, etc. You get what I'm trying to say. So custom experiences all feel like a personal touch where you give the customer the power to choose and really get involved and get to know each other again. It's kind of feels like a team builder. And then it's making your event the right size, right fit, and right style for everyone. So
Amy, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Personalization.
Yeah.
And power of choice.
Yeah. You're really thinking about them and wanting them to have something to take away too. Yeah. It will leave an impression. So if you think that's cool, then our final category here of unique should be really exciting. This is the think when I'm saying unique of like, wow, I didn't know you could have an event there. So a few ideas here: cruise boats, libraries, distilleries, breweries, industrial buildings, boat docks. There's all kinds of places where you could have an event. And again, I'll pull back here, and I don't want to get too far into this because technically anything could be an event space. But if you're on the website and there's not a single mention of groups or private events or whatever, I wouldn't discourage you. I would not discourage you from calling, but just know that they might not have a department dedicated to events, and someone on staff might end up with your event and might not be a reliable option for a planner. So I have a few tips. Staffing in somewhere like a brewery or distillery, they've got a whole nother business that they're running. So your event might kind of take a back seat, and you might need to operate it, on your kind of on your own. And they might not be in the corporate business mindset. So it'll be a very casual environment, you know, an easy training with an activity, something like that. And then they might not have as much experience. Again, this just kind of wraps it up with start to finish event planning. So get your event specs guides together for these types of venues. Spell it out for them. And then I think on our next slide, we go even deeper into outside the box event spaces. So these are like truly non-traditional, like they fully operate for another purpose, but you can move your private event into them. So after you've checked out the website and looked at private event tabs and everything, these will merit the $3 badge. Because it's highly likely that you're going to be paying a base rent price that only gets you in the door. You know, I'd say $5,000 to $10,000 at least in rent, maybe on a Tuesday to Thursday. I don't suggest these venues for weekends, but most of you probably aren't doing events on weekends. The infrastructure in these buildings, you'll have to rent. They might not have tables, chairs, full catering kitchen, lights, chauffeurs, staging, et cetera. So you'll be bringing in rentals. That'll cost you a little bit more money. And finally, like that immersive art installation there, or that museum, that historic theater, they are big wow spaces. So just consider your audience, how many people. I know some road shows are smaller. Some of these venues might have smaller spaces, but just they're really cool. And I'd love to investigate them further for you. Just a realistic view of what to expect in a truly unique space. So
yeah, definitely higher end, maybe a product launch. I think of one we did with a tech client. So many of these ideas scale international as well. It was an old industrial manufacturing plant that was taken down to the concrete floors, and it's basically a blank canvas. And we popped up a product launch there for them. So yeah, higher spend, but you know, higher business purpose, business objective. So the event matched the business objective, which is critical in these.
Yeah. So I think we've got Sebastian up next.
Yes. So I'm back, and it's question time. So we want to hear from you, just like I asked before. So please send in your questions. We're still doing the drawing. If we can go ahead and move on to the next slide for StubHub. So it's $50 gift card. Yours to grab. Please give us your questions. Quick promo. Just want to do a quick little side note here. We want to share some resources with you that we think that would be helpful. We have Roadshow tips for success and Rockin' Roadshow success story. That one's actually pretty interesting. We did a little success event with the group on our website. So check that out, and that you can see is Taylor Swift. So yeah, so check out these resources. Again, they'll be in the slides as we send them out by tomorrow. So you get the deck. And now it's question and answer time. So hopefully that gives you
coming in there.
Yeah.
How much time do you need to schedule a multi-city roadshow event? Amy, why don't you take that? We've got some best practices here we'd recommend.
Yeah, so back to that roadshow strategies, I'd say I'd properly plan for multi-city at least 6 to 8 weeks. Because if you're probably going to be sourcing multiple venues across multiple markets, and we want to give you really quality, diverse sourced options, at least 6 to 8 weeks. And that way you also have time to build a really cool branding around your product, identify your customers. I think that 6 to 8 weeks feels right for that. Great.
There's another one from the audience. What has the best turnout rate for partners to keep them engaged? A great question. You know, that is the $1 million question. So there's probably a winner out there, and whoever brought this one forth. But you know, it is understanding the business audience and the business objective, and really trying to match the right experience with the budget available to get your biggest return on investment or return on objective. What would you say to that, Amy?
Yeah, what has the best turnout rate for partners to keep them engaged? Some some sort of interactive element. We're doing some, planning in Nashville, and maybe you have a singer-songwriter experience. I would just say something that they haven't seen before. That's what we're talking about here. So new and exciting ideas. Yeah.
So we have another question, and this one's coming from Leah. What do you think makes a bigger impact? Hosting more events at smaller and cheaper venues, or hosting less events at more expensive venues that offer a better experience?
Good question. I would say less events and not more expensive venues, maybe just putting more into less is more, quality over quantity in major markets, maybe that you're pulling from multiple markets, that to me always is going to be quality over quantity.
Yeah, I agree. Finding that unique venue that has a little, I don't know, stickiness, we might call it, or uncommon attraction. Oh, I haven't heard of that venue before. I've heard of that, the ball field around the moms and dads, but we haven't experienced that yet. Those are the things that when you can, really tap into what's trending, what's new, what's fresh. I think you did a good job of that, Amy, on some of those pro tips on the restaurant side, and even on the grand side with museums and, more expensive, but sometimes you can get in there for a very reasonable rate, and it would match the audience type and the budget.
Yeah, it's always worth asking, trying to say, okay, well, I'm coming in on a Tuesday, 2 to 7. What can you do for me? I know you're dark on those days. Talk to them about your budget, and we'll do that for you.
Yeah. And Leah, we have a process internally at Bright Spot, a discovery process. So we'll ask a bunch of questions, make sure that we're making the right recommended solution so that we are, in fact, going to help get you the biggest bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Another question that came in, what's the best time of day, of week, for an event like a roadshow?
I'd stay away from Saturdays when you're fighting for, those kids' soccer games and trips to visit grandma and grandpa, or your house of worship, even on Sunday, wherever that may be. And then probably even Friday. I don't know where you'd go from there, Amy.
Yeah, I would focus on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because Monday people are trying to get caught up from the weekend. And so Tuesday, Wednesday, give them a half day in the office, let them come out to your event, and then maybe take off, beat the traffic early. Or you could do a brunch. I have a Tuesday, Wednesday brunch. That's something, let them get to the office on the other side or get back home to work from home, and give them, time to complete tasks. I'd say Tuesday, Wednesday, you're also going to get some of your best rates on venues. And that gives us, some leverage on asking for a better deal, or maybe more availability on vendors too. You'd probably have more AV companies, bar companies, et cetera, that'll be available on a Tuesday, Wednesday, so you can really max it out.
Perfect. So
and Thursday is practically the weekend now. So sorry, Sebastian, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. I have one last question. I think we have time for one more question. We have a large sales team. When should we choose a restaurant venue versus a restaurant with pool, pickleball, axe throwing?
Yeah, so I'm going to say your top number at a restaurant venue, at least what I've seen recently, is 30. That's pretty standard for a boardroom private space at a restaurant, versus somewhere like a spin ping pong place or something that might have 45-ish, 50, 60 people capacity. That's just, I wouldn't go over 30 on a restaurant. Now that's your typical just straight up F&B restaurant.
Gotcha. Well, I believe we're running out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Michael Butler, for the takeaways.
That went fast. Sure. So just a couple of takeaways. Yeah, again, virtual is dead. Back to live events, and we're all glad for it. Meetings mean business. We all share that sentiment in the industry, and it's time to get back at it, nurturing those relationships, closing more deals. Roadshows drive business results. Be sure to match your business objective to the venue type. Again, we're we've got a discovery process. We'd run a prospect or client through to make sure our recommendations are aligned with that exact approach. And then I think, two of my final greatest takeaways, have an area sales champion in the region, because you're going to have maybe your couple people that are flying from city to city to be at these multi-city events for a presentation or maybe a speaker component. But to have a local in that city market champion that's behind on the front end, save the date and invitation, and getting people confirmed through their sales channel to attend, and then on the back end following up on the leads that were generated during the event. And then last, you've heard content is king, but ultimately in roadshow business, experience is the king. We'd like to thank you all for joining us. We had a great time. We hope you did too. We'll see you on a next Bright Spot webinar series. Hope your day is bright.
Take care. Thank you.